Today, we have the pleasure of having Zoe Weil as our speaker. Zoe is the president of the Institute for Humane Education, also has given 6 TEDx talks and authored 7 books, including The World Becomes What You Teach. And Zoe just informed me that there is an upcoming book on the way called The Solutionary Way. So I'll certainly be keeping my eyes out for that, although it sounds like it won't be ready for another year. We can look forward to that. And today, I ask that everyone stay muted during Zoe's presentation, and we will be taking questions at the end. So you can hold those until the question and answer session. But Zoe, I'll hand it off to you to share your knowledge and enthusiasm and passion with the rest of us.
Thank you, Suzanne, and thank you so much, everyone who's taking this time to be here today. And so I'm going to ask, if you're willing, if you would turn on your video just for a minute, because I want to ask a question, and I just want to see a show of hands in response to the question. And if you would prefer, you can always use the hand raising emoji. Oh, but I'm seeing lots of you sharing your screens. Thank you so much. So I'm going to ask you this question, and if you have the answer where you want to raise your hand, just raise your hand. So my question is, how many of you feel a deep desire to make a difference in your community and or in the world, and really want to work collaboratively with others to solve problems? Oh, look at all the hands going up. Oh, that makes me so happy. Thank you. Okay, so if you want to turn off your videos now, feel free to do so. You don't have to. I am going to talk just briefly, and then I'm going to share slides. So one of the problems that we notice at the Institute for Humane Education is an inability to come together to solve our problems. In fact, that could be the core problem that we face. And so I offer this solutionary approach as a way for us to come together and to solve problems in ways that create a more sustainable and more just and more humane world. And we think of this solutionary approach as next level problem solving and next level action to create a future where all life can survive and thrive. And primarily, we bring this approach to educators who can then prepare students to be solutionaries. And so we work with schools. We have a graduate program with Antioch University. It's offered online. We have master's degrees, a graduate certificate, and even a specialization within the doctoral program in education at Antioch. So we offer all of these ways to help educators bring this solutionary approach to others. And we work primarily with educators because we believe that the education system is the root system that lies beneath every other societal system. And if we can transform education, we can create a future that truly is the one that I think everybody who's here today yearns for, that is healthy and just for everybody. So we know that the education system is really playing the long game. So it's also important that we educate current politicians and business leaders and leaders of NGOs and people who work at nonprofits and activists to be solutionaries, because those who are in positions of power and influence now can benefit from this solutionary approach. So I am going to now share my screen and move into the slides. Okay, so what does it mean to be a solutionary? So the word conjures up a lot for people. It's a made up word, and most people have a sense of what it means. But the word solutionary is not synonymous with problem solver. Somebody can be a problem solver and solve the problem of damming a river or blowing up a mountaintop for coal removal, but that doesn't make them a solutionary. And that is because being a solutionary has an ethical component. So we define a solutionary as a person who identifies inhumane, unjust, and unsustainable systems and then develops solutions to problems that do the most good and least harm for everyone, people, animals, and the environment. So you can see that ethical component embedded in the very definition. We also use solutionary as an adjective, meaning pertaining to or characterized by solving problems in a strategic, comprehensive way that doesn't harm one group while helping another. So why be a solutionary? Well, being a solutionary is good for the solutionary, her or him or themselves, and being a solutionary is good for the world. So many of us feel so burdened by despair and anxiety and depression about the state of things. And the very act of being a solutionary and contributing to positive change is so healthy for us. It gives us meaning, it gives us purpose, it brings joy when we are working together with other wonderful human beings who are trying to make a difference. And of course, it's obviously making a difference in the world. And one of the things that we often notice is that as we look at the problems in the world, we can often feel overwhelmed with a sense of hopelessness. But being a solutionary actually generates hope. And I'm going to share my favorite quotes about hope with you. So the first comes from Professor David Orr. He's a professor at Oberlin College. I love this quote: "Hope is a verb with its sleeves rolled up." And singer-songwriter Joan Baez said, "Action is the antidote to despair." And climate activist Greta Thunberg said something very similar: "Once we start to act, hope is everywhere." So what is this solutionary process? How is it different from any other process of solving problems? Well, I'm going to share a 10-minute video with you that describes the whole process in 10 minutes. And then after the video, we're going to go through the steps a little bit more closely. So this video we produced primarily for students who would be learning how to be solutionaries in their schools, in their classrooms. So you'll see that the approach is oriented toward these students, and the problem that they are addressing is a problem that they see right in their own school. So as you're watching this and you're thinking, well, I'm not a student, just notice the process itself, because we're going to be talking about it more.
What can we do to create a truly healthy and humane world where all people, animals, and nature can thrive? Most of us want the problems in our communities and the world to be solved. We don't want people to go hungry or be treated unfairly. We don't want the environment to be destroyed. And we don't want animals to be abused. Is such a world even possible? And if it is, how can we make it happen? It is possible. We just need solutionaries. What are solutionaries, you ask? Solutionaries identify unjust, unsustainable, and inhumane systems that cause problems and then work together to solve those problems in ways that do the most good and least harm for people, animals, and the environment.
Have you ever noticed how much plastic and disposable stuff we use here? And almost all the food is made with meat and cheese.
Why is that a problem?
I've been learning about the harmful impacts of disposable plastics and certain kinds of foods on our health, the environment, and animals.
Like what?
Plastics are now so common in the ocean that there's an area twice as big as Texas, full of plastic in the Pacific, and this harms sea life. And animal agriculture is one of the biggest contributors to global warming and water pollution, causes so much animal cruelty, and can harm our health.
Wow, I want to learn more about this so we can solve these problems.
Solutionaries bring a solutionary lens to problems, which helps them not only to identify problems, but also to see all their interconnected causes and solve them in sustainable ways. Solutionaries understand that they must consider all stakeholders, including ecosystems and other species, in order to come up with solutions that do the most good and least harm for everyone. So how does the solutionary process work? Solutionaries choose a problem that they want to solve. It might be a problem in their community, in their country, or in the world. Because smaller local problems are usually easier to solve than bigger global problems, it's wise to start locally, like these students. In doing so, they develop solutions that can also help address more far-reaching problems, like climate change, pollution, inequities, poor health, and animal cruelty. Next, they conduct research to better understand the problem. Solutionaries are investigators who seek to fully understand problems in order to solve them in ways that reduce any unintended negative consequences. They engage in careful, fact-checked research, and they seek out people to learn from, including experts on the problem and its impacts on the environment, on people, and on animals. They talk to others who've worked on similar problems in other places. And they also reach out to people who want to keep the system in place. There are a lot of stakeholders to learn from in order to find solutions that will be accepted and adopted. These students need to talk to other students, cafeteria workers, other school employees and teachers, people being impacted by climate change, animal protection advocates, politicians, the companies supplying food to the school and benefiting from the way things are, experts like scientists and nutritionists, and of course, anyone who has successfully solved similar campaigns in the past. As solutionaries, they listen carefully to everyone, even if they disagree with their opinions. They maintain an open dialogue and build a community to solve the problem they are addressing. So how do people become solutionaries? First, they bring a solutionary lens to problems. This means that they see that problems can be solved. They seek the perspectives of others. They recognize that problems don't exist in isolation. They focus on solutions. And they look for ways to ensure that no people, animals, or ecosystems are harmed by their solution. Next, they have to think like solutionaries, which means they have to become good critical thinkers, systems thinkers, strategic thinkers, and creative thinkers. They learn to see that problems are like the tip of an iceberg, and we have to look below the surface to see what's causing them. Solutionaries identify the interconnected systems that lead to problems, as well as the mindsets, beliefs, and worldviews that give rise to those systems. Solving problems can be challenging. Often, we find ourselves wanting to ease others' suffering, and so we may come up with humanitarian ideas such as raising money for charities to help those in need. It's wonderful to help others, but we need to remember to put as much energy into solving the problems that cause harm and suffering to begin with. And sometimes we just want to clean up the mess in front of us. So we may think of ideas like recycling the plastic waste from the cafeteria. But that doesn't stop the problem of so much disposable plastic being created in the first place, and might even be ineffective because many recycling centers no longer accept these plastics. We still want to recycle, but we need to remember that recycling by itself isn't the answer to the problems of disposable plastic. So while humanitarian and cleanup efforts are important, unless we address the causes of the problem, the climate will continue to warm. People will continue to become ill from unhealthy foods, pollution won't stop, and animals will suffer. The next step for solutionaries is to develop and implement their solutions. To be successful, solutionaries look for a way to change an unhealthy system like these students are doing as they address the food system at their own school. Their solution is to create a practical, cost-effective plan for transforming their cafeteria so that the foods served and products used are healthy, sustainable, and humane. Then, they work with their school administrators and the chef to make their plan a reality. The result? The food is just as tasty while also being healthy, friendly to the environment, and no longer cruel to animals. The school's food suppliers still make money on the healthier foods, but now other producers like local farmers are able to sell their foods too. There's no more plastic waste to dispose of and pollute the environment because everyone is filling up their reusable bottles and using reusable utensils and plates. What's great is that when systems change, often our mindsets change with them. Where it used to be an inconvenience to eat in healthy, sustainable ways, it no longer is. The new way of doing things can quickly become something that everyone can support. Small victories can then lead to even bigger changes.
You want to help us do this for the whole school district?
Let's do it.
Successful solutionaries will want to share their solutions so that they spread far and wide. How can these solutionaries create more far-reaching changes beyond their own school? Some students might want to work with the media to spread their solutionary ideas. Some might connect with those working in the food system, such as plant-based food companies and local farmers, in order to make it easier to change what's served in cafeterias. Others might want to participate in the political system by working with legislators to pass new laws that help all school districts make the switch to providing students with the healthiest possible foods while not damaging the environment or causing animals to suffer. What does this look like in practice? One group of creative students makes a video to share their message and then organizes a town hall event where the media then report on that message. Another group contacts plant-based food companies and local farmers for support in order to make continuing positive changes to the cafeteria even easier for their own and other school districts. And another group decides to bring all the research and information they've gathered to legislators who can pass laws to stop using taxpayer dollars to support destructive farming practices and start supporting food production that's good for everyone, starting with what's served to children in schools. As you can see, solutionaries come with different interests and skills and bring their unique talents to bear on the problems they care about. They build a community around the problems they want to solve. They work together to create synergistic, systemic solutions that are likely to be adopted. Then, they share their successes widely, inspire others, and take on new challenges, celebrating along the way as a more just, humane, and healthy world unfolds. It's time for all of us to put on our solutionary lenses, think like solutionaries, and work together to solve the problems we face. There's no time to waste. You can make a difference. The world is waiting for your great ideas.
So I hope that that overview video has whet your appetite to learn more about what it actually entails to become a solutionary. So we have developed a 4-phase solutionary framework. And for those who are paying really close attention, you might have noticed there were 5 phases in that video. That's because we are always working with people to tweak and improve upon the work that we're doing to help people become solutionaries. So we are currently settled on these 4 phases. And the first one is identifying a problem to solve. The next one is investigating that problem thoroughly, which means connecting with stakeholders, understanding the causes, and investigating the impacts of the problem on people, on animals, on the environment, and then researching what's been done so far to solve the problem. And then we moved into phase 3, where we are innovating and we are proposing solutions and devising the ones that are the most solutionary, and then creating a plan for implementation, which leads us to phase 4, where we implement and we present our work and we assess and reflect and iterate. So we're going to break this down, and we're going to start with identifying a problem. So let's say we want to address something like climate change, a huge problem. Probably we are not going to be able to address climate change all at once, which is why looking at local manifestations of a big problem is generally the way to do this process, because then we can have success and move forward, and our ideas can get spread and shared and implemented elsewhere. So one local manifestation might be that in our city or our region or our personal energy is not from renewable sources. Or maybe there's a lack of public transportation options or biking paths in our community. Or maybe, like in the video, there are carbon-intensive foods that are served in our local schools or in our workplace or in our religious institution or at our local hospitals. So any of those could be local manifestations that we address. And we have seen students in schools addressing, for example, the first one of these local manifestations. So in Trenton, Maine, which is in Hancock County near where we're headquartered, which is in Surrey, Maine, there are a group of students right now that are working on reducing energy from fossil fuels at their own school. Years ago, I was invited to visit a school in Guadalajara, Mexico, and those students had worked with their school to install solar panels. So that's how they were addressing the energy issue in their own school. So as you saw in the video, that was looking at what was served in the school cafeteria, and that is going to be our problem statement for going through this process together today. So our problem statement is the foods served in my local schools are not climate friendly. And again, that could be in your municipality, hospitals, government functions. So the next step is going to be to talk to stakeholders. And you saw the students had a list of stakeholders in that video. So we want to talk to school personnel. We want to talk to people who've successfully transformed school cafeterias. We want to talk to experts on the school lunch program, which has certain requirements for what's served in the cafeteria. We want to talk to experts on the impacts of current cafeteria food on climate and on the environment, as well as nutritionists on the impacts of this food on student health, and who can also advise on healthy and climate-friendly school meals to replace the current foods. And we also want to talk to experts on the impacts of the current cafeteria food on non-human animals, because remember, any solution that we devise has to be good for people, animals, and the environment. And we want to talk to those cafeteria chefs who've already switched, and they're going to have a lot of recipes and a lot of ways of helping us. So you saw the iceberg in the video, and we find the iceberg model to be really useful for understanding the systems and the mindsets that contribute to problems. So the reason why an iceberg model is used so often in terms of systems thinking and problem solving is because an iceberg model is reminding us that what's at the tip of the iceberg, what we can actually see, is eclipsed in size by all of the forces underneath it, because the largest part of the iceberg is under the surface of the water. So in terms of a problem, that problem we see, that the food served in our local school cafeteria are not climate friendly, that's what we can see. That's the tip of the iceberg. What are the systems that are causing those foods to be not climate friendly? And what are the deeper causes, the mindsets, the beliefs, the values, and the biological and psychological factors that contribute to us creating those systems? So that's what we're going to explore and study. So the first thing we may notice as we do research is that the economic system, the political system, the food and agriculture system, the media and healthcare systems, our energy system, and our school and education system are all coming together to create this problem that we see about what's served in our school cafeteria. But it's not just those systems. There are also subsystems within them. So for example, there's an advertising subsystem within the media. There are lobbyists and campaign financing subsystems that interconnect our political and economic system. There are tax subsidies that make those foods that are not climate friendly really inexpensive, when in fact, their costs are hugely expensive if we didn't externalize their negative impacts. So we spend so much money on tax subsidies to make certain foods very cheap and other foods more expensive because we don't subsidize them. And then there are also the education system in terms of nutrition education. Most medical schools don't even have a required course in nutrition. And in the K-12 system, we have industry that has been providing nutrition information. So for example, the Dairy Council, which is an arm of the dairy industry meant to promote dairy products, has been one of the primary curriculum developers for nutrition education in schools. So we have all of these different systems coming together to create our problem. And what about the deeper causes that have led us to create those systems? And some of those include our biological and psychological factors, like the fact that we crave high fat and high sodium and sweet foods, and that they have then become traditional foods. And we have this storybook image of our agricultural system. And all of this plays into this mindset of don't tell me what to eat, and it's out of sight and it's out of mind, which leads to a kind of myopia or short-sightedness. So all of those deeper causes lead to us creating those systems, which lead to us creating this problem. So then we want to look at how are these systems and deeper causes connected? And if we start thinking about where are their connections, well, obviously there's a connection between our economic and our political system and our lobbyists and our tax subsidies. And so as we draw lines between these systems to see the connections, we are going to discover that there's practically all connected. And so we're going to look for those points of really strong connection, and then we're going to look for points of leverage, where a small act on our part can have far-reaching impacts. So when we get to the point where we are trying to now develop a solution, we've created this rubric from emerging to most solutionary to help us understand where our solution really lies. Is it more humanitarian? So for example, if we want to address climate change and there's been a terrible climate change disaster and we send money to those in need, that is a humanitarian act. It's really important, and hopefully we'll all be doing those things. But if we're only focused on those emerging solutions that aren't really addressing the root or systemic problems, the problem is going to persist. That we really want to move as far as possible into developing solutions that significantly and strategically address those root and systemic causes without harming people, animals, or the environment in the process. So what could some solutionary solutions look like? Well, in the video, the solution that they developed is to work with their school to replace the foods that contribute significantly to climate change, and they were also addressing plastics, with ones that are more climate friendly. So that's what we could do. We could just do it right in our local school. The next step might be working with the whole school district so that all schools in our community change their cafeterias. And then our next step might be working on legislation to shift the whole school lunch program so that it adopts climate-friendly meals as the default. And we might want to work at an even higher level on legislation to end subsidies for foods that contribute significantly to climate change, and to instead subsidize healthy and humane and sustainable foods instead. And then we might want to work on campaign finance reform so that the system doesn't keep creating so many problems. So our next stage is to implement and assess and then iterate based on what we have learned. And so that's where we put this all into practice. And if you are thinking to yourself, well, this is a lot of work. I was sort of hoping that I would come to this and I would walk away with some ideas and not like a huge journey ahead of me of doing tons and tons of work. Well, if you are feeling this sense of like, oh, this is a little bit more involved than I thought, I'm going to show you this slide again, that the reason to be a solutionary is this is such a win-win. It is a win for you, and it's a win for your community, and it's a win for the world. That when we work together with other people and we create a difference, we feel good. We look in the mirror, we have respect for the person looking back at us. We feel the joy that comes with making a difference, and we see that difference in the world. So I have just given you a very quick overview on how to be a solutionary. And obviously in a 45-minute to an hour presentation, you're not going to walk away knowing everything that you can do, and you may forget some of these steps. So you can just go to our website, humaneeducation.org, and you will find 2 free guidebooks. The Solutionary Guidebook is primarily for educators who want to bring these ideas to students, and How to Be a Solutionary is for change makers and students so that they can do this on their own. So please go to our website and download whichever guidebook you want, or both of them, and you will have all the resources you need. Now, we are constantly updating our guidebooks based on what we learn from working with teachers and students. So we are going to have a new version of the guidebook in June. So if you download it this week, just come back in a couple months and download the most recent version. So for those of you who are thinking, I want to do more, I want to go deeper, I want to have a community to work with, I don't want to do this all on my own, we have a Solutionary micro-credential program. Now, right now, this program is for educators. However, we are creating a version for change makers, business leaders, government leaders, people who work for nonprofits who want to become solutionaries themselves rather than educate others to be solutionaries. And we are going to be piloting that new version in the fall, and it will be available next year, hopefully around this time. So if you're interested in that, just make sure that when you go to our website, you sign up. So that way you'll get our e-newsletter and you will know when different possibilities are available to you. So this is a sticker we have, the world calls and solutionaries answer. And I know we have people here from all over, and I'm so excited that people are here, not just from Maine, which is where we are headquartered and where Wells is headquartered, but so many other places in the country and world. But just to let you know that while we are a Maine-based organization, we are working with Maine teachers. And in fact, we're going to be working with teachers at the Wells Reserve this summer. We are an international organization, and we are working with teachers and communities across the globe to bring the solutionary framework to them. And to learn more and to support our work, again, just visit our website. So I am going to stop sharing, and I am going to do a guided visualization with you. And then I'm going to open up for your questions, comments, ideas. If anybody has any solutionary work they've done that they want to share, I'm sure everybody here would be eager to hear it. So for the guided visualization, if you would just close your eyes and sit very comfortably and take a few deep breaths. And I'd like you to imagine that you are very, very old and approaching the end of a very long and very well-lived life. And picture yourself on a beautiful day, sitting outside on a park bench, and the birds are singing around you, and the air that you're breathing is clean, and the waterways around you are clean, and species are recovering from the brink of extinction, and nobody goes to bed hungry because they had no choice, and there hasn't been a war in many years. And as you're sitting there on the park bench, a child comes up and joins you. And this child has been studying history in school and learning about much darker times, times that you lived through. And the child has all sorts of questions for you, wanting to understand how things changed. How did things get so much better? And then the child asks you one last question, which is this: what role did you play in helping to bring about this better world? What did you do? How would you like to answer that child's question? What will you say to that child? Take your time in thinking about your response. And now I invite you to open your eyes, take a couple deep breaths again. And if you're comfortable in sharing your video so we can see each other, if anybody wants to share what they would say to that child, I invite you to do so, or you can type it into the chat. And I will also open for questions. And I'm happy to have you unmute yourselves to ask a question and to ask it in the group. Or if you prefer to write it in the chat, we can do that too.
So it looks like Nan has her hand raised. Nan,
Great.
go ahead.
I have a question for you.
Yes.
I'm a retired teacher,
Oh,
and I would like to find a way to use that skill set. Obviously, I'm not associated with school, but teaching is something that I really love to do. So if you have any ideas around how I can use that skill to spread these kind of ideas, that we can all be a part of a solution and that it will serve us all, would be really helpful. Thank you.
well, Nan, thank you for having been a teacher. And I think that when one retires, it's a fantastic opportunity to take everything one has learned and apply it. So I would love to have you actually talk to the director of K-12 and teacher education at the Institute to learn more, because she's going to have a lot of ideas for you. Her name is Julie Meltzer. She's the one who's actually going to be doing the workshop for the Wells Reserve with teachers this summer. But, you know, teachers are always needing professional development and always wanting it. And maybe what you can do is take what you've learned. If what we are teaching resonates and you want to go deeper into it and learn this solutionary process and bring it to others, I mean, there's so many opportunities for teachers to give workshops and do professional development and do coaching for other teachers. So let's continue to talk offline. I'm actually going to put Julie's email and my own email into the chat. So I just put Julie's, and here's mine. There we go. I know that wasn't
So that
super
sounds
helpful.
wonderful.
Thanks. Any other questions, comments? I'm seeing things in the chat. It's hard for me to read the chat and talk to all of you. So Suzanne may tell me what's there, but would love to hear from more of you.
We have Sophia shared that she would tell that child that she attended this webinar and it rocked her world, rocked my world, caring for people and creating community.
I love that.
And Godfrey has a hand raised. Go ahead, Godfrey.
Hi, sorry that I don't have enough light to open my video. I'm in Kenya in Kakuma refugee camp, and I'm so impressed. I'm so empowered. Learning solutionary, becoming solutionary is something very unique. Thank you for coming up with this program. I'm going
Godfrey,
to share, yes.
no, go ahead. I just want to thank you so much for what you're doing in the Kenyan refugee camp.
You're welcome. I'm going to share two experiences. First of all, the one that made me feel proud of going through the solutionary program before becoming a solutionary teacher. When I reached to Kakuma refugee camp, the refugee camp is located in a very semi-arid environment. The species in the nature is like snakes, centipedes, spiders, scorpions. It has been a threat to human life, mostly to refugees. And for almost 20-something years, no one has ever addressed that issue of stink and snake bite. But myself, when I came in 2019, a few months after I got stung by a scorpion, the pain I went through through that day didn't only stop me from thinking beyond that. I went on looking at the source, the cause of the problem. I was not the only one, but many people around, some have lost their loved ones because of stink and snake bite. Then I decided to take myself ahead, to move around to see if there is any agencies that has ever done something like that, so that I get to learn more about the venomous species in the refugee camp. I found none, and no program has been ever initiated related to that. No sensitization about the species in this arid environment, for example, nothing. Then I said, oh, there is a problem of safety of refugees. Then I started collecting scorpions for me to heal my own fear, get familiar to that, and then cope up with my daily life. But while collecting scorpions, I found that there were very different species from one another. Then I said, there is more to discover from that. So I went on, I discovered all the 6 types that terrorize people in the refugee camp. I went on looking on the snakes. I found the 5 types that are harmful in the refugee camp. I went on the spiders. I discovered also the spiders. Then I came up with a flyer so that I start sensitization. If scorpion stink and snake bite has become a major problem in the safety of these already vulnerable people, it's because of lack of information, lack of education, lack of sensitization. Then I took that work as my own work to address the issue of vulnerability of refugees on venomous animals. So I moved into 27 schools. Thank God that everyone has welcomed me, and then the message made a wow. Then from that time, people could come. Local radio stations were calling me to go to talk about venomous animal, about safety, about promoting safe environment. And then one thing astonished people is that I was at the same time talking of safety of people and safety of the species. Said, why do you want people to keep those animals safe? I said, yes, as long as people keep safe environment, this species will not get into the shelters. they'll remain far away, but in the natural environment. So if we crush them, it means in one way or the other, we are also impacting the nature in a very negative way. So we have to keep our safety. The animals also will live the life in a very different way. Why? Because these animals, they are not only harmful, but they are also playing a big role in the ecosystem. So explaining that was like, where are you from? What do you do? And why do you come with that information? It's a very good thing that I have ever experienced from the time I was seeing people coming, teachers coming to me to ask about flyers related to venomous animal in Kakuma, presenting them also the species that we have discovered, giving them the catalogs that we have made. But the challenge is like, we can't reach everyone as long as those catalog and the flyers are not printed in a good number to give to people. Since then, the rate of sting, the rate of snake has gone down. Why? Because majority has got the information and are trying to keep safe environment around themselves, and then not harm or provoke a venomous animal. It makes animals stay safe, and at the same time, people stay safe. So when I was, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry to cut you off. I just wanted to say, like, this example is one that I think it goes to the heart of solutionary thinking. The idea that we could actually want to protect those species that most people consider pests and should be eradicated, and you would protect them and protect the community at the same time is so solutionary and so beautiful. And I'm so grateful to you, not only for addressing that issue, but for bringing the whole solutionary process to children in the refugee camp. Thank you so much.
Yeah, most welcome. And then I when I was proposed to get enrolled in Solutionary, then I took the training for the 4 months. It was wonderful. I said, okay, I'm already playing a role of a solutionary without getting the solutionary training, and now I'm in.
Yes.
So becoming becoming a solutionary teacher, it made me an amazing person to myself and to the community, mostly to my students. So they feel like they are not being taught something to memorize, but they're experiencing what they should know about solutionary. Putting solutionary into the context of refugees is something that I'm working on. And since we'll be having these workshops, I'll be keeping updating you about what we are doing. I'm so grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, Godfrey. I'm so grateful for you.
Thanks so much for that story. I know we have a bunch of other questions in the queue here, so I think Kimberly has been waiting. So Kimberly, why don't you go first, and then we'll get to Barbara and Lindsay and others. Kimberly, go ahead.
I was just wondering if you could go back to the piece where you said, like, if this seems like a lot of work, because I think that the sort of triage and how to pick something incremental, knowing everything's connected, can be a little bit overwhelming. Looking for the deepest root cause can become almost like, let's dismantle capitalism, and then it feels too big and broad. And so sometimes I find I'm more in the biggest place of all the connections, and then picking an incremental project feels like always leaving something or somebody out. So I just wondered if you could speak to that.
Sure. And hello to your kitty. This is a challenge for me too. I'm somebody who sort of saw every single problem. They're all connected. I care about all of them. What can I do? And I decided I could work on educating people to be solutionaries, right? Because I don't have the answer to every problem, but I do have an approach. So in some sense, I took the biggest possible thing I saw, narrowed it down to what I could do, and went in that direction that has far-reaching tentacles. And I think there are some really important questions to ask ourselves. The first question is, what problems most concern me? And if you're like me, and there's so many of them, that can be hard because you can't narrow them down, kind of like you're saying. But the next question to ask yourself is, what am I good at? And the third question is, what do I love to do? Because if you can find the place where the answers to those three questions meet, you know, your life is pretty golden, right? If you can actually do what you love to do with the best skills you have in service of solving a problem you care about, you're in really good shape. And it's not easy to find that sweet spot, as you just said. But I do think that, you know, even looking at the problem that I just used as an example, what served in the school lunch program, that could seem so small, like just changing one school's lunch program. But because it's scalable and because it's spreadable, and because there are going to be other people who go off in different directions, then you can see this confluence of change potentially happen. The other thing that's useful sometimes to do is, if you find a friend or some colleagues who care about the issues you care about, and you each take a slightly different approach because you've answered those different questions, you can all be working on a piece of solving the puzzle. And you can feel great about what they're doing. They can feel great about what you're doing. You can feel part of something bigger, even if you're focused on something narrow. So I hope that's helpful.
Thanks. So Barbara, go ahead. Oh, you're muted. Barbara, do you still have a question? We can't hear you.
Can you unmute at the bottom?
There we go.
Yes.
I've
Great.
been trying. First of all, I think what Godfrey has said to us is just one of the most, wonderful things we could have heard during this hour. He is an amazing person. His work, of course, and all of our work here must be incremental so that nothing gets changed in a flash of light. It takes lifetimes to really do this kind of work, as I'm sure Zoe would say. I am a teacher. I'm also a writer. Now, I've written at least one book on animals. I'm active on behalf of non-human animals, and that's my focus. I wrote a book on how it feels to be a particular animal. You probably know this book. It's called Call of the Wild, and it's a marvelous piece for really getting into not so much theoretical animal psychology, but what Buck does in this book. And by the way, it's a book for adults, not children. The publishing business has turned it into a kid's book, and it's not. As a matter of fact, I urge children not to read it until a certain age. However, I'm concerned that what I do doesn't reach anybody, or very few people, a negligible number for the size of the problem we're talking about. And I'd like to know if you have any intuitions about how I might turn what I do a lot of, namely writing, into a kind of solutionary method for change.
I think I'm just sort of curious.
Yeah.
if other people, if you can use the raised hand emoji or share your video, how many other people feel that sense of like, I can't reach enough people. The scope is so big and I feel so small in my work. How many other people feel that way? Okay, some people, not a lot,
Yeah.
or at least it's not showing. Oh, more hands. I share that too, but then I'm reminded every time another group of students or the children in a refugee camp in Kenya are learning this, that everything gets amplified, whether we see it or not. Barbara, you have no idea the impact of your book. In fact, just this past week, I have had 2 people talk about your book to me. And so you probably would, had no idea that just this week was reaching me. So the fact is that we often have a far greater impact than we will ever know, because 99% of the time, nobody reaches out to say you had an impact. So for all of those who are feeling that sense, we are all in this together, and every little bit we do has an impact. So yeah, thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you.
So I see 2 more questions in the chat, and we're at 1 o'clock. What are your thoughts? Oh, you're on mute.
I am happy to stay a little bit longer and answer any further questions. And I realize some people have already signed off because they have to go. So I will take 2 more questions and then we'll sign off. And this will be available on video if anybody wants it later.
And your email's in the chat. So, okay. All right. This next one from Jennifer. I'm curious how more heart-centered approaches can be incorporated into this model, which, to be honest, seems fairly typical of problem-solving models that I've been using in corporate America for decades. What parts of it represent the shifts in consciousness so necessary to restore and protect our natural world?
That's a great question. Thank you for asking it. And so compassion lies at the core of humane education. And so fostering compassion is the early process of this. So in identifying problems that we care about, students, everybody who goes through this process really dives into learning about and feeling into the problems that most concern them. And so I'm sorry I neglected that in this. But it is at the core. It's what drives and motivates us to solve anything, is that we care about solving it. And so that is a core component of humane education. And it's often fostered with younger children as the primary approach, because we don't want to overwhelm young children with the ills of the world and the problems of the world, although they already know about them at younger and younger ages. But instead to instill this love of and appreciation of nature and each other and other species, and then cultivate that compassion, which will then lead to a greater sense of responsibility for creating change. I wrote a book called Above All, Be Kind, and I talk about fostering reverence, respect, and responsibility, and fostering that reverence in us at the youngest possible ages. So thank you so much for bringing that up.
Okay, great. And lastly, from Lindsay, could you share tips for fostering solutionary thinking with early learners, or strategies for using the solutionary framework with those in pre-K through 3rd grade? Thank you.
Well, that's a perfect segue from the previous comment. We have one of our graduate students has been incorporating solutionary learning and humane education in a preschool program. And if you reach out to me, I'd be happy to connect you with her. And a lot of it is fostering that sense of compassion and taking very small problems right around them and solving those very small problems. And so while most of the teachers who are doing this work with students are doing it with middle school and up, we do have people who are doing it with preschool, and I will be happy to connect you. So reach out to me, Zoe@humaneeducation.org. And we'll take it from there. And we also have resources on our website and in the guidebook, the Solutionary guidebook, we have suggestions for this as well.